All right, welcome back to the channel, and I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Ross Goodwin, aka Bhoys Analytics, because we're talking about a signing at least, or a close signing. Josip Juranovic is set to join Celtic for 2.5 million plus add-ons. He's joining from Legia Warsaw, and he is due to fly into Glasgow on Friday, if the Polish media are correct in their estimations. Ross, how are you getting on?
I'm doing great, Enda. Thanks for having me on the show again.
So this is a guy who has been linked with the club for a long time. I think it's a couple of weeks at least since you did your thread on Bhoys Analytics on Twitter. So how excited are you by this?
This is a guy I'm very excited about. He fits the kind of profile to what we're wanting. Good in the ball, high creativity, can actually put a cross in a lot more. But most of all, what we all really want to hear is that he's a right back. Ralston has overperformed probably everyone's best expectations, but there's still that kind of quality gap to the European level. And if he's put up against teams like Rangers, so to have a guy coming in that's played at is playing at a top international side. He's playing for Legia Warsaw, who are also the dominant side in their league. So it's going to be quite a similar environment to that he's experienced over in Poland. We're winning every games of that most importance. It just seems like the perfect profile of player to come in and play Ange's system with that kind of high technical level of ability.
Mm. It has been a year and a half pretty much since Celtic has had a starting right back, or a permanent starting right back, since Jeremy Frimpong left for Bayer Leverkusen. So it's nice to see that these deals are getting done nice and quickly when it comes. But essentially it's the permanent signing, which is good, because I think over the last week or so when this died down, it looked like Jan Kuoto was going to be joining from Man City on loan, which I don't think anybody wants to see loanee signings coming in since John Joe Kenny. In terms of Josip Juranovic, we'll talk about his strengths and his weaknesses, and then we'll give him a rating out of 10 for the quality of this signing for Celtic. But I guess he's coming into the squad. It does put Ralston back on the bench. In terms of what this is going to do for the overall squad, do you see him coming in and being bet in straight away, sort of like Furuhashi has done up front? Do you think he's going to hit the ground running straight away?
I think I'd be very surprised if he doesn't come into the squad as quickly as possible. Where he comes in for, I think the first game he's probably going to be available for might be the Rangers game. I don't know if he'll be in time for the St Mirren game at the weekend. If he plays 30 minutes against St Mirren, I wouldn't be surprised if he did appear against Rangers. The thing is, we do have the international break coming up after that. He will be away with Croatia, so he's not going to have a huge amount of time to adapt to the system, even over the international break, which may be something we might have wanted. But I think there's every chance he could come into this St Mirren game and even start the Rangers game. It's not anything that Anthony Ralston's done, but this is a different level of quality that we're bringing in. It's a full Croatian international. He's in double digits in appearances. He's played at major tournaments. This really is a top signing for Celtic coming in.
So let's start with the strengths then, because I think positivity, this is looking like a good signing. So what are the main strengths we're looking at here with Juranovic?
So when I'm usually doing my threads at the moment with especially fullbacks, which has quite been the focus over the kind of transfer window, I've tried to split it into a more kind of defensive and then maybe more on the ball. So kind of start with his defensive strength. So I'd also say I think he's quite good on deck. He's 5'8", so he's not the biggest physical profile, but even then, his experience does show. He's 26 now. He's been around. He's played a lot of games. He's at international level, but his defensive duel success rate, that's 67.6%, which is really high, even in terms of like the Scottish League. He'll be in around the top 10. That's higher than Greg Taylor, and it's higher than Buta as well, who was also linked with the same position by quite a bit. As well as that, very good on the possession adjusted interceptions, 6.66 per 90. That's not as much as Greg Taylor, but it's still quite a high number in comparison to our league, and especially for a dominant side. So to me, that would indicate he's quite good in the deck. He's good at knowing where he should be in the pitch, quite good with his positioning to try and get onto the ball. I think interestingly as well, defensively, he gives away next to no fouls. I mean, I think in my thread at Starfelt, he was quite similar. We've maybe not seen that yet from him, but he was very low in the amount of fouls he's given away. So I wonder if that's something Ange just tried to target, try and limit maybe opposition getting the balls into the box. So for example, he's only 0.21 fouls he's given away per 90. For comparison, Greg Taylor 0.64, and that's also quite a small number. So he's given away 3 times less as many fouls. So he's not he's more likely to try and win the ball if he can, or try and back off, which I think's quite good for Ange's system, because he likes his defence to retreat and go narrow quite quickly. Doesn't mind the ball coming into the box, likes to trust the centre backs to try and win that first ball. And I think we've seen that over the first few weeks that he's been quite successful. Onto his ball playing ability, I mean, this is what he's been brought in to do. XA per 90, 0.18. For comparison, Greg Taylor has a very good XA per 90 of 0.22 over the past year or so. And that was coming into a dominance. That was coming into from Kilmarnock to a more dominant side, and he's kind of kept that up as he's came in. So to bring in, and he wasn't brought in especially even to be creative. It was never something he was good at Kilmarnock. I think he only had 0.03 XA per 90. So we're bringing in a guy from a team that's less dominant than Celtic are in their league, and he's already providing huge creative metrics. In terms of putting the ball into the box, I think I've put up a video showing Josip putting the ball into the box. It really is his specialty. Really profiles kind of quite more similar to maybe Barisic at Rangers, but he's putting in 5 crosses per 90, which is also more than Taylor, although just he's putting in 4.94, but with much greater accuracy, and actually of over 40% on your crosses. So that means every game he's going to be hitting the head of an attacker 2 times a game, which is really what we want to be seeing. Just in more of a technical sense on the ball, his passing accuracy, even at a team that's probably you'd say it's less dominant, Celtic at lower possession. I think they're only about 56 and we're in the mid 60s for possession, so he's on the ball less, but his passing accuracy is higher than Greg Taylor's, and it's in the 80s, whereas Taylor's just in the high 70s. His average forward pass accuracy is also quite a bit greater than Taylor's. Taylor's only 67, Josip's at around 73.5, but Josip's also making more forward passes per 90. He's much more vertical, trying to get the ball forward, and he does it with greater accuracy. Key passes per 90, he's also really high as well on the metric, 0.68 per 90. Greg Taylor is the actual leader in the Scottish League, I think, if I recall correctly, is 0.81. So again, a player of this technical ability coming into a dominant side, I'd expect him to try and be matching Taylor's key passing ability. And I think maybe people are a bit down in Greg Taylor's key passing, but I think his passes in behind, especially when Furuhashi was on the wing into the gap between the wing back and the centre back, and allowing Furuhashi to get in the keeper, I think that was quite a deadly weapon. I think McGregor as well, when he gets into that area, it's what a pass he makes as well. So yeah, a lot of positives to take from Josip's game. It's actually quite, I guess you'd expect from a player coming into his peak years. It's very well rounded. He knows exactly what he's going to do. I had a look at some of his historic data as well. Even from his time in Croatia, he's been slowly building up his creative metrics until it's hit around a peak at around 0.2 XA per 90, which is where he's seen his inclusion in international squads. So we've seen his career has been constant growth, and I think Celtic's another step up for him, so we could see that kind of growth again.
Well, I think that's what I'm most positive about is, firstly, the transfer fee of 2.5 million from Legia Warsaw are a big side. The Polish league is a good league. So first of all, it's a good fee. Secondly, he's 26 years old. So he's a player who's coming into his peak, as opposed to, maybe 2 to 3 years off that peak. So you're expecting him to push on from where he is at the minute. One thing that I do want to ask you on his crossing. So in that video, and from what I've seen of him, he puts in a lot of crosses, but a lot of them are quite high, as opposed to the short cutbacks that Ange has been playing quite a bit since he's come in. How do you think he's going to develop that? Do you think he will adapt to that, or do you think it'll be another weapon on the right-hand side, whereas Greg Taylor will be pulling it back to the penalty spot?
Yeah, well, it is interesting. I think the low cutback's a much easier type of cross to do. You're generally hitting it back to players running into the ball. So I think it's something a player of his ability is going to be able to do regardless. When he does get to the touchline, he does tend to be a bit more like James Forrest. He prefers that kind of dink into that kind of back post area where you take the keeper out the game and you get the attackers running on top of the defenders. Obviously, we don't have a target man, I'm going to say yet, although it's looking quite likely that that's something we're very specifically looking for with the Greek international. He profiled quite similar to Thomas Henry, who we're also linked with. Whether these are linked with Edward leaving or as depth options, with it has been appearing that Ange hasn't liked the look of Ajeti and Griffiths so far. So it does look like he is linked to bring in that kind of target man. But yeah, I'd say Josip, a lot of deep crosses, especially, which I think's probably the hardest type to put in. That seems to be a specialty. You're going to get a lot more opportunities to do those, especially with, and when looking at Ange's side with the Marinos. It is something his sides did do, get those early crosses into the gap between the centre backs and the goalkeeper and try and get players running onto them. So maybe there is kind of logic in kind of the transfers he's trying to bring in. But yeah, in terms of the low cross cutbacks, I think Josip's more than technically good enough to do them. I've seen a few of his clips with Croatia where he does it a bit more frequently, and he does that with quite good accuracy as well.
Yeah, and an early ball in could also work when we're implementing the high press and actually win the ball back quite high up the pitch and catch defenses off guard. In terms of his weaknesses, then he's 5'8", so not massive. Aerially, he's not coming in probably to dominate. Is that something that's worrying, that we still don't really have a player in the back four who's going to be defensively strong in the air?
Well, I think his aerial duel success is 40%, which, I mean, it's not terrible for a fullback. Frimpong's was like 28%. But that's extremely small sample size. He's only having an aerial duel maybe around once every two games, which is really low considering Greg Taylor's about 3.7 per game. So he's going to have to either get a lot better at it, or from what it's looked like to me, if he knows he's not going to win the duel, he does like to step off, whereas Ange would rather Greg Taylor puts the pressure on and force maybe a throw in or where the defense can reset. So it'll be interesting to see how he adapts to that kind of play. But yeah, it's the physical side of the game that is the weakness. However, I'm quite optimistic in terms of how we are presenting ourselves as an aerial force. I think I'd put out the other day that the 8 shots we got from corners, although this doesn't involve the fullbacks, that was the most shots Celtic have had in Wyscout's record from corners in one game. Hearts are a bigger side than us, so I think it really hammers home the point. It's more about intelligence and movement and where you position your body, and being better than the opposition from maybe more of a movement point of view that affects headers maybe more than, oh, you're just taller. Being taller does help, obviously, but there's more to it than just, oh, he's 6'5", oh, he's 5'8". I think where you position your body and how you jump with your opponent is a huge factor as well. And I think we've seen Ange implement some of these early strategies, especially in offensive corners we've seen so far.
Anything else that you'd be worried about looking at him?
I'd say so in terms of like the right backs we've had before, with Frimpong, who was a very big dribbler, and Buta, who was another player we're supposed to be linked with. Frimpong was a huge outlier in terms of progressing the ball. Juranovic progresses the ball very similarly to Greg Taylor. So he's only at 2.8 dribbles per 90, which is less than Taylor. So I think he's quite a mobile player, and he's going to use his mobility to get into more of the inverted fullback roles. He's going to try and work the ball forward with his feet rather than dribbling it himself. Whether people see that as, I personally would rather see our players do that. That fits the system more, and that's why I was quite glad we didn't go for Buta in the end. He was more the kind of ball progression by himself rather than with the system. His passing, for example, Buta's forward pass accuracy was 48%, whereas Juranovic's is 69%. So it's a huge difference in technical ability, especially in the more in the areas of the pitch where they're going to be under pressure more. I just say, yeah, it's the physical side of the game. There has been times where I think it's probably quite common in dominant sides for maybe defenders to switch off. I think mistakes become a lot more obvious when defenders are a bit more exposed and they maybe switch off and make a mistake. That has happened at Legia a few times, but every defender every season is going to make a few mistakes a season. It's all going to be about concentration. But I feel like he's been brought in to do this inverted fullback role. His heat maps show that he does like coming inside a lot more than he's not hugging the touchline as much. He has a lot of actions coming in closer to the D, closer to the centre circle. So it does seem like he's quite a good fit for this kind of system. But no, I'm not overly worried about him. I think he's very competent defensively, and he's going to be probably for the Scottish League at least, he's going to be an elite level creative talent.
Well, let's hope so. I'm going to ask you to put your predictions on the line here, I guess. Rating out of 10, what would you be rating this transfer in terms of quality, what player we're going to get, we'll bring in the transfer fee of 2.5 million. How would you rate this?
I mean, you're looking between 8 and 10 out of 10 for this kind of transfer, for the fee you're getting, for the data he's shown, for the level he's played at already. It's a ridiculous thing. Obviously, these kind of transfers, your only real worry is the settling in period. But Ange's had no issues settling Abada into the team, and he's had no issues settling Furuhashi into the team. But on the other hand, you've got Starfelt, who's probably not hit the ground running as fast as they do. I think that's probably more due to just the way we're playing. I think defenders coming into the team are a bit more exposed than they probably were in their previous systems. So I'd say it's going to be an 8 or a 9 at the moment, but if he hits the ground running, it's probably going to be a 10. But that kind of settling in period usually can be around 6 months before they start producing the same level of metrics they were at their previous teams. But as we've seen from Furuhashi, not seen that. Abada, not seen that. They've came in, hit the same kind of metrics we were seeing in their previous leagues. So it's either going to go the kind of way that Furuhashi and Abada has, or Starfelt, and he's going to need a bit of time to adjust. But I think with his creative and technical metrics that he's shown at Legia and playing at big teams in a big league, playing at the biggest team in a league already, he's coming in with like all the advantages you would look to have in that kind of player.
Well, I really hope you're right about that 10 out of 10 marker then. Really excited to see how this goes. Hopefully he'll be signed in probably the next couple of days, to be honest. It seems like it's a when rather than an if. So Ross Goodwin, Bhoys Analytics, if people want to follow you, it's at Bhoys Analytics on Twitter. You do loads of good breakdowns of all these transfers as well as the games as well. So thanks for joining me today on the channel.
No worries, Enda. Thanks for having me on.